Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our recap of Holy Week. I'm joined by our pastor, Brian Boyles, and thank you for tuning in all week as we, in a short amount of time, try and recap the last week of Jesus' earthly life. And we're walking away with some big takeaways from each day. And as we get to today, a lot of more liturgical faith backgrounds or more orthodox faith call this Maundy Thursday.
Maundy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Maundy. My grandparents said Sunday, Saturday,
Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday.
So, who knows? It was just another way to say Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
But this is Maundy Thursday.
Yeah.
And in the Holy Week layout, this is the time where Jesus celebrates Passover meal with his disciples.
Yep. Maundy. And a lot of folks just now refer to it as Holy Thursday, but it's historically been known as Maundy Thursday.
So where does that come from?
Yeah,
Maundy.
so it's from the Latin word for commandment.
Okay.
So Maundy is not the actual Latin word. It's sort of an abbreviated word. The Latin for commandment is mandatum. So you might hear mandate in there.
Okay.
So mandatum is Latin for commandment.
Said like that, mandatum.
Mandatum. If you say it with an attitude, maybe a little crinkle your eyebrows, mandatum.
The Italian language, I think Spanish is this way too. It's very passionate.
Yeah, it's romantic.
Yeah.
It's romantic language. That's what it's called.
Even when they're angry.
Mm-hmm. I love it. It's fun.
Yeah.
That language is a lot more fun. Well, so Maundy Thursday is the day of, like you said, he celebrates the Passover with his disciples that evening. It's right before the arrest. And he gives them a new commandment. Mm-hmm. And so we jump out of Mark for this one, and we jump over to John chapter 13, specifically verse 34. And it's one particular verse. Let's see, I'll read it. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Pretty
reiterating that point a few times.
And you got to remember, when you're going through the Bible and you see something repeated, in those days in the Greek, this was written in what's called Koine Greek, there was no underline, there was no italics, there was no bold. They would repeat something. Mm-hmm. And that provided the emphasis. Jesus is clearly emphasizing love, 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 love.
When he just displayed this by washing their feet, is what he did right before they enjoyed the Last Supper together. Mm-hmm. He knew Judas would betray him. He says so in his monologue, I guess, to the disciples. Mm-hmm. And that gets Peter up in a tizzy.
It's funny because none of them knew who was going to betray. Like, I've always found it interesting that when he said, one of you will betray me. In fact, one of you who will dip your bread into this bowl, one of you sitting at this table right now will betray me. And they're all like, is it me?
I wonder if Jesus had like the side eye.
Mm-hmm. One of you will betray me. That'd be great.
The other disciples, who?
They have no idea. Yeah. None of them were like, we know. We've been telling you. It's Judas. And they're all like, is it me? So I find that fantastically transparent for the apostles. Not only for the apostles to honestly say, am I going to betray you? What was happening in their heart? Were there doubts? Were there fears? Was there confusion? Yeah. And then for the writers of the gospel to include that embarrassing moment of the apostles to say, hey, we were all thinking we were going to betray him. Yep. That's fascinating to me.
What I think, too, understanding the context of what they've been through in the past 3 days.
Yeah.
Like, so much has happened, and it's like their whole life flashes before their eyes. Undoubtedly, the past 3 years of following Jesus, literally following him, flashes before their eyes, and they get this really damning statement that one of you will betray me.
Will betray me.
And
and remember, Monday, the fig tree is cursed. Mm-hmm. They have trouble with it because on Tuesday they're like, explain the fig tree, and he's like, you need to have faith.
They had a night to sleep on it, and they're still
we are still struggling. And he says, trust. If the fig tree being withered, causes you some struggle, then the rest of the week is really going to be upsetting to you. Yeah. Well, this is an example. Yeah. So he says to love. So this is it. Jesus is now giving them a new command, a new mandatum, a new Maundy on Thursday. And that new command is to love each other. But what's interesting to remember about this is the command to love is not new. You had honor or love your father and mother in one of the 10 Commandments. You had In Deuteronomy, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That was in there. I mean, we see it as, we call it the great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, so the command to love by Jesus here is not what was new. What was new is the way he said to love. And so if you look back at that verse, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, then here it is. Even as I have loved you, that's new, that you should love one another. So the new command is not love. The new command is to love as I've loved. So that changes things, because a Jewish mindset in first century Israel is Jews were to love Jews. Jews were to help take care of other Jews. Yeah. So to a first century Jew, a neighbor to a Jew is just another Jew. So that's why when they're saying, well, who should we love? And he's like, well, parable of the Good Samaritan, which one of them acted like a neighbor? And they say the one that showed love. He's like, right. The question that the Jews asked was, who should we love? Jesus answers how to love. Sure. And the one that you love is the one who needs it, right? So the person had been beaten on the side of the road. The priest walked by, ignored. The Samaritan's the one who helped. Learn how to love. Quit trying to figure out who am I required to love.
And I love how Jesus, this is a perfect parallel to Jesus' restoration of Peter, when he says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? And feed my sheep.
Do you love me? 3 times.
3 times.
Do you love me? This is it. So if we're to go, well, wait a minute, we're not just to love God with all our heart. We're not just to love our neighbor as ourselves. We're to go even harder and farther to love as Jesus has loved us. And so that becomes the conversation. So how do we love the way Jesus loved? Well, you begin to think, these 12, fixing to be 11, apostles, they brought nothing to the table. They weren't celebrities. They weren't wealthy. They weren't the educated, the influential. They were none of that. They were fishermen, most of them were fishermen. They didn't have a whole lot to bring. So it is believed that one of the 12 was actually a pretty well-off fisherman with a pretty good business. But even still, he wasn't a politician or something like this. And so to love the way Jesus has loved is regardless of what you bring to me, regardless of how you've even treated me. We've been studying Mark together as a church for a while. I mean, they were constantly misunderstanding over and over, but he kept loving. So we're to love others regardless of how they are with us, regardless of what they can do for us, regardless of how even they treat us. Yep. And so if I was to say to you, think of someone that you don't really care very much for, someone's going to probably come to your mind. And it could have been that they betrayed you like yesterday, right? It could have been that they've been just a bad friend. They've been rude. They've been dishonest. Okay, well, love them the way Jesus loves, right? So that's why this is such a new commandment. As I've loved you, I mean, like you've mentioned, Jesus washed their feet. In fact, some churches that traditionally will celebrate Maundy Thursday will have a Maundy Thursday foot washing service, just to kind of commemorate that he's washing the feet of the disciples, even though he's the leader. It's important to remember,
too, when Jesus washed the feet of the disciples, he then told them to wash each other's feet.
That's cool.
And I love all the parallels in what Jesus is saying, and it's important not to miss these, that every time he shows an act of love, he tells them to do the same.
Yeah, he's the servant leader. That's another way of his, how does he love as the servant?
Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve.
So he's saying we're to stop seeing ourselves as the ones who are to be in charge, or we're to be the ones who receive the benefit, the gift, the reward. We're to see ourselves as the one who came to serve. And I think it was 1 John, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. So you're still seeing that. It's like John was there at this moment, remembered it, and even wrote about it in one of his letters. I think it was 1 John. So the love command becomes pretty important. So we're supposed to love not because we are so great, like, well, I love them because I'm such a great person. We're supposed to love because Jesus is so great. So why do we love them? Not because of how great they are. Why do we love them? Not because of how great we are, but we love them because of how great Christ is, and he's commanded us to. And he loves us, and we're not great.
Yep.
Right? So
Jesus wraps up, is close to wrapping up his time, and then in John 14, he says, don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. And then he lays out what life with him in eternity will look like. And in this time of trouble where he says, one of you will deny me, where he tells them to love one another. He speaks of his death. He speaks of the persecution that's to come. And yet he says to them, don't let your heart be troubled. And in the middle of a bunch of chaos provides some great words of peace that we hear today at funerals. We hear today in times of trouble, that these great words of comfort that we can give to each other. And it's just another way of following that command to love one another by using the words of Jesus.
Again, so much easier to say, so much easier to understand, so much harder to do.
Yep.
So much easier for us to live in our flesh and be angry at somebody and write them off, make them like, you're dead to me. Jesus says you don't have that right. If you're gonna be a follower of Christ, if you're gonna be welcomed into the kingdom, then you need to be loving the way I do.
Yeah. And there's a whole bunch more that happens on Thursday.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Where, we got the vine and the branches, the high priestly prayer, all of these hallmark moments of our faith and the life of Jesus that happen as Jesus is about to leave the earth. And he tells the disciples at that moment, when I'm gone, it's going to be tough.
Listen, this is why I'm sitting here thinking, this is why it's so important for folks like if anybody is listening to the podcast and they don't attend here or watch us online, we go into every bit of this every Sunday and unpack what's happening. So when we get to these passages in Mark in the months ahead, there's so much good information. Not only that, but I'll add, if ever anyone can go with Amy and I to Israel, we go to so many of these locations and show where it is. You're standing where it is. We talk about it. We explain it. I go through incredible detail. We have some of the best guide in my opinion, so it's a lot of fun. It's worth it. If anyone's ever wondered, yes. And we get to go to these places.
Yeah. Well, I hope these devotionals have been a great help to you. Tomorrow, we will not have a podcast devotional. Instead, we are encouraging you to join us at 7 o'clock on Good Friday here in the sanctuary.
Our Good Friday service.
We're going to have a Good Friday service where we focus on the cross, the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, and we will remember that, we'll celebrate that, and then we look forward to Silent Saturday and Easter Sunday morning when the tomb is empty and we celebrate the greatest day in the history of the world. Pastor,
love it.
Enjoyed it.
Yep, it's fun.
Thanks for doing this. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share this. You can share it on all your social media. Send it out an email, whatever you want to do. And then we'll be back next week with a sermon recap. We hope you have a great week. God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you Good Friday and Easter Sunday. See you.
Yep.